and India as a special partner, of course, in this context. And to discuss this issue in more details, I have an excellent panel today. I'd like to welcome my colleagues, Excellencies, Mr. Jeffrey Onyama, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Nigeria, Mr. Kwaku Sarpong, Deputy Minister, Political and Economic, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, Ghana, Mr. Damu Ravi, Secretary for Economic Relations at the Ministry of External Affairs, India, and Dr. Osta Kaitisi, Chief Officer of the Rwanda Governance Board. Welcome, everyone. So basically, Africa has always been pioneering in connecting the world in terms of, since the ancient times, there has been the trade routes going through Africa, whether spice trade routes between the Greco and Roman civilizations and India, or after that, Africa also hosted the Suez Canal. But now, with this new age, the digital age, Africa is playing a role. It is young, it is full of potential, and it's looking for partnerships with, for example, a dynamic and prosperous Asia. So in this context, if I start with you, Your Excellency, Mr. Onyama, from the Nigerian perspective, and it is a perspective of a country that is already enjoying close ties with India, can you share with us your thoughts on how India and Africa can work together to foster further connectivity and develop bilateral commerce?
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, first and foremost, Nigeria and India have had a long history of very close cooperation and people-to-people relations. We have Indian families that have been in Nigeria for generations and generations. We have, Nigerians who have been studying as students here and the military establishment. So the two countries, we know ourselves very, very well. And of course now, in a more globalized, society, there's a lot more that we can also do together through in many areas. So, for instance, India has a comparative advantage in the health sector, for instance. We've seen that with the COVID outbreak, the role that India has played. Of course, we know that India has a very strong pharmaceutical sector. So the health field is an area that we can do a lot with India. And of course, we've seen the ICT miracle that is India, Bangalore, and the technology capacity of India. And that's another area that we can do cooperate a lot. Nigeria has a very young population and a youthful population that is also getting into ICT and extremely dynamic, and the partnership with India there could absolutely be a game changer for us. And in infrastructure development also, there's a lot of cooperation that we can get from that. 3 days ago, we went to visit some of the steel plants. India is one of the big, steel producers in the world, and of course we want to industrialize. We have had challenges with developing our steel industry in Nigeria, and clearly that's another area of whether we could do a lot with India. We have a framework already, although it's a continental framework, of India-Africa summits. And clearly we're looking at developing a more precise roadmap that responds to the priorities and needs of our country. We can also even look at other areas such as the cultural industries. You know, of course, you have Bollywood and we have Nollywood. Bollywood, I think, is the largest film industry in the world, and Nollywood actually apparently is number 2. So I think, you know, at the cultural level also, there's a great deal that we can do together. And I think so in the field of education, you know, the education sector is another area that there's great cooperation, and the defense sector. A lot of our officer corps have been trained in India, so we have that connection. So really, you know, India is really at a stage where it can transfer a lot of know-how to Nigeria. We have very similar, you know, demography in many ways, you know, population size. Well, India is much bigger, of course, than Nigeria, but, you know, in Africa, Nigeria is the largest country. And so, yes, I think that the ingredients for substantive partnership is very much there.
Excellent, thank you. If I may follow up on that and refer to a World Bank report that was published in March on the global value chains post-COVID-19, and it flagged that several multinational corporations are considering, if not have taken steps already, towards reshoring of the value chains. Now, you are talking about Nigeria's industrial base, and perhaps you have also ambitious plans for the future for further manufacturing and industrialization. In your views, and of course in considering that Africa was discussing for so long the entry into the global value chains, would this recent, you know, developments in the world affect Nigeria in the sense of, will it be considering implementing these future manufacturing plans in partnership with Asia, or will this trend of onshoring affect the vision to come?
No, I think, you know, Asia will have a very important role. We want to also diversify, not just our production, but also our partners. You know, of course, where you know, value chains are concerned, it's always been sort of targeted towards the Western countries, you know. But clearly, you know, Asia is a lot more prominent in our engagement and our relations. And, you know, notwithstanding the challenges, global challenges of today, we are moving more and more, increasing our partnership with Asia. And, of course, India is a big part of that, as is China, and, you know, 1 or 2 other countries. So we very much, notwithstanding whatever else is happening globally, intend to prioritize and push on that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ravi, if I may turn to you. And in 2018, Prime Minister Modi had announced his 10 points for Africa vision. And it included an Indian commitment to guide the development partnership with Africa by the African development priorities, and to also address the challenges of climate change in the process. And it is an issue that is very high on the African agenda at the moment. Can you share with us your view on how India can act with the African countries on development challenges and climate response, as well as to revitalize the people-to-people connect it is already having with Africa?
Thank you very much, Umnaya, for that question. I think it's very important for us to understand the way we actually do the development assistance and the partnership with countries in Africa and around the world. As Prime Minister has clearly mentioned, that it's the recipient country which actually determines what it wants. And our development assistance is also geared to equip countries to freedom and to be able to make their own choices. That's the philosophy behind it. And of course, it fits into the overall context of our South-South cooperation that is geared to creating mutually beneficial win-win partnerships. We have done in the last 2 decades several projects in Africa of a variety of things, including the infrastructure. But before that, I think the capacity building is one of the most important development partnership initiatives of India, dating back to 1964, which is the flagship program of India, is the ITEC, Indian Technology Economic Cooperation Program, where several thousands of youngsters, experts have been trained over a period of time, and that capacity building initiative has expanded. I think in the recent times, we are taking advantage of the digital tools and technologies. We have even expanded the Pan-Africa e-network, where we were able to educate, give diplomas and graduation courses of thousands of courses, which further evolved itself into what is known as the E-Vidya Bharati scheme, where the university linkages got to be established. So there's a lot happening there. And in terms of the variety of programs that we have in agriculture and healthcare, which are very, very important, including energy. We have a small, intensive, high-capacity community development programs that is focused on energy, because today the solar has become so important. We have what is known as also the Barefoot College, where the women were involved in the setting up of the solar units at the village level. These have been very, very successful models. And we continue to do these programs quite extensively in Africa. In the days to come, I think we are looking at how do we scale it and how do we make it more expansive in the entire region. Thank you.
And are you worried at all by the fact that the war in Ukraine had an impact also on India in terms of the rise in the oil and commodity prices and the overall global slowdown? Do you think that might have an impact on the ambitious plans that India has been having to invest and to work with Africa more closely?
Well, at this point of time, we are not seeing that kind of a restriction or a limitation on us because we have programs already ongoing. We have not yet looking at any pause to those programs. In fact, we have even enhanced our commitment to Africa. But the way we are looking at is how do we do it in a way that is going to make more win-win partnerships. We want to create more institutions. Now, capacity building should eventually evolve to institution setting in Africa, including in medical healthcare, because that's become a priority during the COVID time. How do you set up, again, the nursing institutions there, create local capacities? We're looking at agriculture institutions, because that's, again, you need to make Africa self-reliant, be able to have its own experts to deal with these challenges for the future. And these linkages are very, very important. And I believe these are mutually beneficial, even for our experts who are able to go there to set up this kind of institutions, train them. And in a generation later, you will see a lot of well-trained Africans and Indians working together to create these capacities to deal with challenges of the future. Food shortages, for example, the kind of food security is another area we should be looking at. Growing products that are very important for the continent, as well as to be able to import it back to India. I think we have to have a strategic thinking. Yes, Ukraine crisis has, in a way, awakened the need for strengthening the alternative supply chains. And I believe that if Africa and India work together, we should be able to reinforce that idea. We should be able to develop that value supply chains on African soil and to be able to expand it to India and create win-win situations. Job creation is very important because Africa is young and there are lots of youth that need those jobs. So that should be is what we are thinking into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sarpong, I'll turn to you now. And Mr. Ravi just mentioned investing in agriculture. And the fact now that the latest numbers say that African countries enjoy 60% of a global share of 60% of arable land, and yet a vast, smaller share in actual agriculture production on the global level. So in the sense, now that the situation now and the war in Ukraine and the issues with the supply chain are setting perhaps a new agenda, new priorities for Africa, how do you feel, or what are your thoughts about Africa's investing and increasing its agricultural production, and perhaps in partnership with India and other partners in Asia?
Thank you. I think the Russia-Ukraine war has brought to the fore that African countries need to set up. That there is always the potential that we rely too much on the outside world for, let's say, our food security issues. Sooner or later, things might get out of control. So it's a wake-up call for Africa that we need to look inward, develop very robust strategies, agri strategies, to see how best we'll be able to increase productivity in our agricultural sector. In Africa, predominantly, majority of our people are in the agri industry. In Ghana, for example, you come in about 60% of the Ghanaian people are in agri, so very dependent on that. Fortunately for us, we've had a very good relationship with India in the area of agri. India has been a source for the supply of agricultural equipment to Africa. We do import a lot of agri machinery to try to improve productivity in Africa. In Africa, our farming activities are purely being the rudimentary type, relying on manual labor. But we've come to the age where we need to mechanize. And Ghana, for example, is having a program with India where we intend to mechanize our agri, whereby we'll be able to improve productivity, sustain food security, and therefore we'll be able to withstand the shocks that might be externally generated. And in that context, at least we'll be able to maintain our peace and security.
Thank you very much. Now I come to you, Dr. Kaitisi. And in several places in Africa, we see the cycle of conflict, climate change, and displacements impacting the development and growth, added to the setback that is suffered by the African economies due to the COVID-19 recently. So in the face of these challenges, we continue to see women to bear the brunt of the impact, the biggest impact of these shocks. Can African women, in your perspective, recover from these consecutive shocks? And can Africa in general contribute to a new economic order that is pioneered by women and strengthened through diversity and inclusion?
Well, thank you very much, moderator. I think starting from pioneered by women is probably something that could happen in the future. When you look at the leadership of Africa, the African Union is sitting, the absence of women is very obvious. But that doesn't make it the absence of making development as women. And I think Rwanda has had a story that has permitted the presence of women in leadership. And I think before we pioneer, we have to be intentionally inclusive. You know, any governance system that has elements of exclusiveness, whether it's women, whether it's youth, whether it's people with disability, is really at stake. And therefore, I should say that the number of women and the number of challenges that we have on the continent and globally requires us to be inclusive in all ways. Yes, Rwanda has had a position of women in many ways pioneering in different aspects of life. Our history has permitted us to understand the consequences of discrimination, and therefore building a different Rwanda where accountability, inclusiveness, and transparency were the key driving forces has given women the platform. And yes, women are able. But the problem is, and when they come into leadership and into business, they do as well, even better. The biggest challenge that remains is when we are exclusive, when we are excluding, when these shocks come, the excluded feel the pain more. And therefore, I would really like to mention that women can drive any form of transformation, not just for Africa, for all of these regions that we are talking about, as long as we deal with the issues that exclude them. And those will be intentional in terms of governance, in terms of business, in terms of processes and projects. So yes, women can drive transformation, but it will be the whole responsibility of leadership to be intentionally inclusive in approaches.
Thank you very much. I have further questions about Rwanda, actually, and you mentioned there is, I think, a lot of lessons learned there. But I turn back to you, sir, Mr. Onyema. And I'd like to ask you, at present, the share of the intra-Africa exports as a percentage of Africa's total exports is only 17%. Now, with the Africa free trade agreements that came into effect in January last year, the UN is currently estimating that it could boost the intra-Africa trade by 33%. So what are your views of the potential emerging progress should this agreement be implemented to its full capacity or as much as possible? And how do you see the role of third parties and key partners to Africa in this context, especially with the interest that we see from the Indian side into this agreement?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, it's the AfCFTA, that's the African Continental Free Trade Area. You're absolutely right. It could be a game changer. One of the real drawbacks for African trade is precisely what you pointed out, the statistic. You know, about 17% of African export is intra-African trade. And clearly, the AfCFTA is hopefully going to completely change that and really deliver development for the continent. For instance, in fact, coming back to the issue of the gender aspect, it's really something that will be able to even empower women because, you know, the informal sector of Africa is predominated by women, actually. And so an AfCFTA that removes, you know, import duties and, you know, another tariffs will now mean that more women are going to be able to be mainstreamed business-wise, you know, and empower, you know, African women in trade. And it's going to lead to so many, you know, other benefits, you know, with and greater productivity, markets. It'll encourage manufacturing by African countries and, you know, to try and gain market access in all those countries. And how is it going to impact on, you know, foreign partners like India? Well, of course, you know, it's going to be the largest free trade area in the world. And it's just going to make doing business so much more easy for countries. And, you know, accessing 54 markets, you know, much more seamlessly is obviously going to be a huge advantage. And, you know, India, for instance, would then be able to have economies of scale, investing in one particular country or whatever, or two or three, and being able to, you know, access the other markets without going through all the bottlenecks and all the, you know, trade inhibiting rules and regulations. So, so it really has all the potential to completely transform the continent.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ravi, I turn to you once again. And I have a question, considering that 90% of the African trade is conducted by sea. Do you see a chance for revitalization of the 2017 Asia-Africa Growth Corridor Agreement that was launched by India back then to connect certain and select ports in in India to African ports with Japanese assistance? This initiative has been launched 5 years ago, but not a lot of progress has been made until then. So do you consider that this may be relaunched in a way or revisited in the current context?
Well, I think the time has come for us to look at different ways of doing business, activity, or collaborations. In my view, there's a lot of logic and reason in being able to do trilateral cooperation projects. So you could look at the connectivity, you could look at infrastructure projects, ports, airports, doing with third countries in Africa. You know, you could do partnership with, like you just said about Japan, and a number of countries. And in recent times, that interest is increasing. And we're keeping an open mind. We would like to explore that option as well. And I think what is driving that kind of a desire to, and very clearly, is we see a great opportunity in Africa in the days to come. As the minister has said, that a free trade, Africa continent free trade agreement is immensely beneficial for many partners who wish to do business or engage with Africa. The Agenda 2063 is another item, which is industrialization of Africa, has an immense potential. Keeping that in view, I think it's important for us to position ourselves in doing these activities with third countries, even bilaterally or trilaterally. Wherever there is a scope and opportunity, we can do it better in that context, and why not? And I see there is an immense scope in that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Serpong, I turn to you once again. And I have a question about the development first approach. And that was set for the bilateral relations between Africa and India a few years back. The issue is that the partnerships and the investments and the bilateral commercial relations will be focused on the development first and the needs of the African countries. For example, from the perspective of a country like Ghana, with its own ambitious plans, how do you feel that this approach, the development first approach, can be implemented in partnership with India?
Excuse me, can you repeat the last?
How do you feel that this approach, the development first approach?
The development?
First.
First?
Yes.
Okay. Right.
Which means to prioritize the development goals and then to plan the strategic and the economic partnership to serve it.
Okay. India and Ghana have, over the years, have very good relations. And India has been a big brother to Ghana in its development agenda. I would say so far it's been good between Ghana and India. And when you come to Ghana, Indian businessmen and entrepreneurs are all over the place. They found Ghana to be a very conducive country to do business, and the government too has been very, very supportive. India, in the course of doing this business, has opened opportunities in financing a lot of projects in Ghana, which a lot of Indian businessmen have taken advantage of, and also have diversified into areas where Ghana think it will be beneficial to the country when you have, let's say, external partners or external investors coming in. So to date, India, like I said, is being a big brother. We've recognized that relationship. It started all the way in the 60s during the independence time from the colonials. And it has continued. And from the political angle, long aligned between the two leaders at that time, India has helped Ghana to transform into an economic giant, at least within this West Africa region. When you talk of big brother Nigeria, the next country that you fortunately talk about when it comes to industrial transformation will be Ghana. And India, I have to say and go on record, that India has stand tall with Ghana and assisted Ghana and continues to assist Ghana. It's been releasing large swath of lines of credit for Ghana to go into all kinds of areas. And so it has been very positive between Ghana and India, and I think we are on the right track to get there.
All right, well, I have a question I will just present to the panel and whoever would like to answer it. At the moment, the trade between Africa and India is still driven by a limited number of products.
Yes.
and they are most importantly primary commodities and natural resources. And now they are accounting for about 75% of the total African exports to India. Now, Africa has ambitious plans, but do we actually going to pursue these plans in the near future in the context of the economic difficulties that we're facing at the moment, and with the help of India? Is there a vision to pursue a plan or a strategy to change this reality and bring more diversity into Africa's exports to India and to other partners as well?
Well, as for the economic difficulties and challenges, it will always be there. Because even if we take the first world or the European countries, they do have economic challenges, just that it's relative. Now, the development of Africa, at the end of the day, is for the African leaders to be able to identify the areas that they want their economic development to be. And so far, I would say that India, we talk of India's support has always been project-led. And for me, it's a good thing to be that, let's say if your issue is to do with agric, and you need assistance to develop it. And India, so far, has always demonstrated that if you need help in agric, we'll come in and deal with projects in there, instead of actually releasing monies for you to go, and maybe Africa so far hasn't had, we haven't been that good when the monies are just released and left to us to use it as we want. And I think India has learned something from it to make sure that when we are releasing the support or we are coming in to support you, we want projects that are important to you to be identified. And then we'll be able to come in and back you with whatever we can do to help you. So far, the relationship between Ghana has been on that trajectory. We identify the areas, they will come in with their financing, and then the projects are done, whether it's pharmaceutical, whether it's in agric, whether it's in the construction industry, whether it's in energy. In all these areas, Indians have come in not just throwing in the money, but actually making sure that this is targeted at projects. And for me, I think it's one of the best ways to go.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Kaitisi, I come back to you. And I'd like to draw on the lessons of the success story of Rwanda. And in your view, can Africa leapfrog into economic development using technology? And what would be the lessons learned from your experience in Rwanda?
Thank you very much. Yes, Africa can leapfrog from ICT as a perspective. And I'll just give a few examples. But I want to put in the bedrock of that one key element. Any form of development will be sustainable and will allow leapfrogging if it's only citizen-centric, if it focuses on the prosperity and well-being of the people. And that's where I'm going to use my examples from. And it's part of what India and Rwanda have done together as well, or how we have partnered and learned from one another. And for example, the use of drones. We have used drones initially for blood and medicine provision for the people. For those who know Rwanda, it's commonly known as the land of 1,000 hills. And that makes moving around the country a little bit harder if you're just going to use an ambulance on the road. But ICT can be adjusted for the well-being of the people. Through drones, we are able to deliver blood, we are able to deliver ARVs on people with HIV/AIDS. We are able really to bring meaningful life to the people within a very precise and short period. The same applies to the agriculture sector, and I know India has been doing very well on that, where we are using precision farming. It is still on a very small scale, but we are able to know when to add, when to irrigate, through the use of drones as well. So that is key. And when we talk of the use of ICT as a service delivery channel or vehicle, we are also talking about dealing with certain issues that affect us mostly on the continent. With the use of ICT, we are able to adjust on issues of corruption, on issues of transparency, on issues of accountability, but also on issues of fast service delivery. So we've seen, of course, the investment in the ICT sector, partnership in the investment of that area, and making it easier. You know, our farmers now can access markets through a platform of ICT without having a lot of middlemen. And that allows how much money goes into the pockets of farmers, and that motivates farmers to farm the more, because what they put as inputs can be really seen as outcomes without losing that whole process of it. So yes, Africa can leapfrog by not taking exactly the same route that everyone took in the development journey, but by catching up where development is going, and of course by embedding in its approaches and methods systems that allow efficiency, effectiveness, and of course service delivery to the people. But the Rwandan story really is built on intended and transformational leadership. So this and many other projects are only possible when all the partnership, all the acts are intended on the prosperity and transformation of the lives of the people, and in an inclusive way, as I said earlier.
What is Rwanda planning to do next? What are the upcoming ambitions in light of the African Free Trade Agreements, in light of the industrialization calls across the continent?
Thank you very much for the question, and I think Rwanda is Africa in a particular place, I would say. And the African Free Trade Area and the Agenda 2063 that he mentioned clarifies the ambitions that the continent has. And Rwanda has embedded those ambitions. Of course, you will add that we are also part of the globe, and the SDG 2030 is a very driving force for us. So very key elements. Climate change is real. And therefore, dealing with climate change and adjusting to climate change is an area that we all need to engage with. Food production, you know, but also agro-processing. I think it was earlier mentioned, food security is going to be a common issue for all of us. India and Africa have a beautiful but also very slippery challenge. We are having a youthful generation. That gives us an advantage of the future. The advantage of being in charge of the labor, the markets of the future, but also the disadvantage if we mismanage that population, if we do not create the right jobs, if we don't give the right skills to that youthful population that we share, both India and Africa, then we are at a very slippery level. So skills development is a very core element, and preparing not only the Rwandans but also the Africans to be able citizens of the world who will make contributions that will be really intentional in dealing with the challenges. But as you mentioned earlier, one of the biggest challenges, Africa is bringing commodities on the market, and that makes it extremely expensive for us. I think there is cheaper labor. We can build the skills that we need on the continent and do not just make it out of Africa, but also make it in Africa. And I think the core element is, can we make it Africa and take it out of Africa with added value? And there is areas of investment in that. So investment, trade is going to be driving. And I think I will answer the development first approach. And the development is going to cost all of us. If we are the biggest free trade area, if you combine India and and Africa and look at the population that we contribute, and the development is going to cost us very highly as a world, as a globe. Therefore, we can only invest in development first, because if we do development first, we do development sustainably. Otherwise, there will be interventions that are just against poverty, and sometimes it's very hard to use poor approaches to fight poverty. You have to use developmental and prosperity approaches to really deal with issues of poverty.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more. Thank you very much. And I was just, because when I was preparing for this session, I read that India had created an industry of personal protective equipment for COVID-19 just within a few months from the outbreak. really an impressive story, and it is an example of what the partnership can do in terms of manufacturing medical equipment in the continents. I think I can open the floor for discussion, for questions, and if anyone has questions, please proceed to the mic. Please keep your question under 1 minute, and we're happy to answer them. I will take 3 questions at once, and allow me to start with the young fellows, the Raisina young fellows, if they have any questions. Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Diego Llosa from Peru. This question is for any of the panelists. A lot have been said about how to improve African intra-trade and cooperation and trade between Africa and India. But except for Secretary Rabi, nothing has been said about working together multilaterally under the multilateral trading system and the World Trade Organization. So we have an upcoming WTO ministerial conference, and there are a lot of issues, pending issues, under the Doha Development Agenda. My question is, what are the expectations and views from Africa and India with respect to this conference, and what can they do both together to have a successful ministerial conference?
Thank you. Ma'am, can you please go ahead? Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Udo Akamimo, and my question goes to the African ministers on the panel. In your opening remarks, you talked about the relationship, your individual country relationships with India, and how India supports African countries. And so could you please elaborate on what your individual countries offer India? Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more question. Please, go ahead.
All right, my name is Peace Chikodnaka Ezedili. An anchor and a political correspondent reporting for Africa Independent Television, Nigeria. So my question is, like the Deputy Minister of Ghana did say, Africa must sit up. I find that very crucial, and that will bring up my next question, which is, climate change remains a major issue in the sub-Saharan Africa, and for a stronger partnership with countries like India, a lot of people would want to find out what practicable modalities the African countries or the African governments have put in place to ensure that it limits the possible barriers, which are like the rising insecurity. We have the Boko Haram in Nigeria and the banditry attacks in Nigeria, for instance. And in terms of trade relations, wouldn't this hinder a prosperous trade relations with countries like India and the rest of the world?
All right. Thank you very much. So I will take more questions, but let me first get answers for these 3. Now, they were directed to the panel. If anyone would like to answer perhaps the first question about the ministerial conference and cooperation. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can. That's the WTO ministerial. I understood. I didn't quite hear very well. It was a WTO ministerial. And what Africa can do to contribute to that. Well, first of all, the Secretary General of the WTO is a Nigerian, so we're definitely going to support the process. But it's important, globally, that the next round of trade negotiations really gets going. We've seen a lot of challenges to the multilateral system in the last few years. Unfortunately, for many, many years, the global community has been making a lot of progress towards, pulling down trade barriers and having liberalizing trade. But obviously, we've seen some challenges in the last few years, especially from some of the big trading nations. And the WTO process has been almost paralyzed. So it's absolutely essential that we get that going, and the African countries are united, especially, setting an example with the Continental Free Trade Area, a really practical demonstration of the political will to prioritize and promote free trade. So now we want the global trading system the member states to now develop the political will to get things moving, and Africa is very, very supportive of that process, and we hope to kickstart the process and to start moving back towards a more liberalized global trading arrangement.
The second question was about what the individual states represented here can offer India. So, Mr. Sarpan, would you like to answer that?
I want to look at the issue that the last speaker raised with regards to climate change and what India and Africa can do in the light of the fact that climate change especially, well, climate change is all over there, it's affecting everybody. It's in Ghana, it's in Africa, it's in West Africa, and I'm sure climate change is also having its own effects in India. In West Africa, for example, as she mentioned, climate change is also contributing to problems that we are having in the Sahel regions. And these problems are bringing up peace and security issues. And the peace and security issues are threatening the whole of West Africa. It's not only in the Boko Haram area that he's talking about. You go to Mali, the coup d'etat that happened there that challenged the democratic dispensation is partly to do with climate change, youth unemployment, and instability. Burkina Faso recently had a coup d'etat over there, and part of the reasons, if you go into it, has something to do with insecurity, peace, and yes. And I think between Africa and India, with the kind of good relationship that we have, it should be possible for the two to be able to strategize as to how best India will face technological advancement in agric. And if climate change is affecting agriculture in these areas, and because when it affects food production, and it affects unemployment, and it affects youth unemployment, and the terrorists are able to use that to try and get hold of the young, unemployed, and unstable youth into their ranks, and then twist their minds for them to follow their agenda and create more peace and insecurity. So I guess with the kind of relationship that we have in India, and India being a technological leading country in agri, we should be able to sit down and map out strategies to see how best we'll be able to combat or contain the issues of climate change and its effects in agri within our region. And I think it's one area that India needs to look at critically and be able for us to sit down and have a serious discussion and evolve some strategies to be able to contain it.
Yes, it is indeed, as I mentioned, high on the African agenda. Africa is hosting this year the COP27 as well, addressing the climate change. Dr. Kaitisi, what are our respective countries, what can they offer India?
Well, what can they offer India? I think the initial question is, what is the environment of offering? And one of the interrogations that we really are supposed to be doing is, why have we had limited offers? And I think discussions in this dialogue have been really on the legal frameworks, the policies, and the systems that exist. And those systems, in a way, have disadvantaged Africa in different ways, leave alone its own underdevelopment, because its own underdevelopment is the biggest disadvantage. But I think what Africa has to offer starts with the collective effort of Africa. Each country is small in its way, but when you bring together Africa, the 55 countries is a great market, is a great arable land that you mentioned, is a great opportunity that can feed this whole world in many ways. And while we have climate change, we are not the biggest producer of the consequences of climate change. And therefore, the continent can facilitate in really being climate friendly. I know Rwanda, the past how many years, have banned the use of plastic that is non-disposable. And that has contributed so much on our very fragile land. And therefore, really, I think what Africa has to offer to India is a collective understanding of the existential challenges that we all have moving forward, and a collective understanding of the approaches and the methods that we need to adjust in moving together collectively. So some of the things, the reason why we still offer commodities, the reason why we still bring cocoa and import chocolate at a very high rate, all of those things need to be interrogated. And then I think we can find a partnership level that is a win-win, I think, as Alia said, and look at, yesterday I learned a very beautiful term of is it the coalition of the nervous? I think there are so many things that we are all collectively nervous about for the future that we need to look at. Pursuing peace, security is a key element for the continent. Development cannot be secured without securing peace and security. The collective effort of pursuing peace and security within Africa itself, but within the partnerships that Africa has made, is a core element that is key. So I probably will not say a commodity on what we have to offer, but I think we have almost similar existential challenges, and Africa has defined through Agenda 2063 who we want to be as a people. And I think it's the people-people relationship that you also mentioned. The African document that we all share states we the people of Africa. And I think bringing back the discussion on we the people of Africa, on the things that our countries need to do together and our continents need to do together to give us that pride of we the people of Africa, and then we the people of the United Nations, because we are the people. I think all the discussions really should be centered on the existential challenges that we have as a people, as regions, as partners, and then find what we need to offer to one another and how much we share. I know India would share very good technology in the areas of agro-processing and agriculture, and Africa has that beautiful land that still needs to be exploited in a good way, with a way that is going to be also climate friendly and conscious of the future that we share.
Thank you very much. We have a few more minutes. If there are any additional questions, please.
Okay.
I will take both questions, so please go ahead. Right, please go ahead, and then you, sir, and then I will take both questions here.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mohammed. I'm from Egypt, and I'm with Raisina Young Fellows. So my question to the distinguished speakers is, if we are speaking about trade between Africa and India, or Africa with the international partners, we have also to speak about trade between African countries, among African countries together. And this, of course, will increase the quantity and the quality of the products they also trade with the outer world. So we have heard for maybe decades about the connectivity roads, about the trans-highway roads between African countries. Mm-hmm. And I think in Egypt, we have built most of our part. So my question to the African speakers, what is hindering the road connectivity between the African countries? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, sir, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. My name is Hallelujah. I'm from Ethiopia. My question is about leadership. The African Union, the transformation from the OAU to the AU and other major flagship African Union's projects like NEPAD or APRM or other, they were led by, they received ideological, political, sometimes operational leadership for a couple of African leaders at their peak times. My question for any of, actually it can be for any of the members of the panel, do you think there is a leadership and coordination between the leadership of the African leaders to address the issue of economic integration at the moment.
To address the issue of?
To pursue, with the African agenda of economic and regional integration, and to respond to global trends and developments regards to trade and economic issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, sir. Go.
My name is Manish Chand, CEO, India Rights Network and Center for Global Insights, India. My question is to Secretary Damu Ravi. So the last edition of the India-Africa Forum Summit was held in 2015. Are there any plans to hold it in the near future? And a linked question is to Nigeria's foreign minister and to African speakers. What are your expectations from the India-Africa Summit as and when it happens? In which direction we need to move forward? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please.
My name is Dominic. I'm from Ivory Coast. Living in Ghana since 4 years now. The fact is, to fly from Accra to Abidjan, I pay 400 euros. Same price to fly to Paris. So I would rather prefer to go and discover Paris or Germany rather than going to Ivory Coast. Another thing is to send money back to my family. I can't. Only EcoBank and UBA, you can bring money out of Ghana. No possibility. The list is quite long when it comes to transaction and free trade in Africa. I would like to hear from you the 3 key elements if we want to cut the elephant in small pieces where we really need to focus to do the basics right before enlarge the picture. Secondly, we expect a lot from the leaders, but I would like to hear what are the leaders expecting from us, young African? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let us keep our answers brief on these questions, please. Who would like to take the first question?
Okay.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. The first question was on, intra-African trade and emphasizing on, road connectivity and infrastructural connectivity, I think, which also, to a certain extent, touches upon the last question. It's true. I mean, that is one of the real results and consequences, in many ways, of colonialism. Because each colonial grouping, whether it's the Francophone countries, then you have the Anglophone countries, the Lusophone countries, Hispanophone countries, and so forth. And the connectivity was from the continent to the metropole, to the to Europe. And as was inferred, once a few years back, you wanted to go from one African country to almost a neighboring African country, you had to travel to Europe sometimes and then come down to that country. So the infrastructure was not harmonized in any meaningful way, and there was, of course, there was no, logic to the setup that you had. And so, the African Continental Free Trade Area, why I say it really be a game changer, is because it's going to force our political leaders, going to force Africans to now, or make it easier, not necessarily force, because they'll pick up the challenge, to reach out to other African countries. And so what will come as a result and as a consequences will be infrastructure, with Trans-Saharan Highway and, and roads, continental highway across Africa, and promoting connectivity and doing business. That will be the natural result of pulling down all the barriers that are really preventing this connectivity within the continent.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kaitisi, do we need an improved level of coordination amongst the African leaders?
Yes, absolutely. We need an improved coordination. And I think I'll take it together with some of the flagships of the Agenda 2063. There is coordination in leadership that allows us to pursue the common priorities that we have set as a continent. For example, just to respond to the transport issue, we had agreed for Agenda 2063 that there is going to be a high-speed train system that connects all African capitals and African commercial centers. Now, there is coordination, there should be leadership coordination in a way, and having a common voice also on the continent, to know the common things that we share, to know the common challenges that we need to confront together, and to know how to move forward together. Given just that example, the pursuit of that common goal, when we have easy connectivity, he will prefer coming to Kigali than going to Paris, you know, and the choice is easier that way because there is ease of connectivity. And I think the coordination, looking at the reforms that the African Union is undergoing today, coordination is greater than anything else because it creates a common voice, it creates a common direction, and it allows for monitoring and evaluation of the things that we do. So yes, in the absence of one collective, coordinated way, efficient systems that monitor what we are doing, we can hardly achieve what we are committed to achieve.
I consider the question on connectivity has already been answered in a way, and I'm afraid this is all the time that we have for this session, so let me bring it to a conclusion. Please join me in thanking our panelists today.